environment to not go so fast, and then you believe in this, and then you realize that, like, wait, the nuclear power plants that you advocated to shut down basically means that you know, your country is like stuck bootlicking Russia, right? And basically, all and like these are just like very natural things that happen, right? And I think this like rapid technological acceleration has been a fact of human civilization for about a century, and that acceleration is it's self-accelerating, and you know, things like postmodernism are a response to that. A lot of the currents of the 1960s were a response to that, and you know, you can respond by saying it's inevitable. You can respond by saying we have to slow it down, as a lot of people did. And it's just constantly you know, like this rapid response to basically the effects of the ideas that were trying to be executed by previous generations. And I think, you know, we're now quite rapidly seeing a new version of that exact same cycle continue today. And I think it's mixing both themes that have been around for a long time together with some pretty new ideas.
So Bill, so what is EAC and why?
Wow. Yeah, I guess EAC is kind of the byproduct of myself asking why are we here, or how are we here? What was the generative process that gave rise to us, that gave rise to civilization, technology, got us to this point where we're having this conversation in this room. We all have wonderful technology around us, and we emerged from a soup of inorganic matter. So somehow there is a physical generative process, and my day job is trying to do generative AI as a physical process and devices. And so that was simmering in my brain, and I wanted to apply that sort of thinking, that sort of framework, that physics first viewpoint, to all of civilization, trying to understand civilization as a petri dish, trying to understand how we got here in order to predict where we're going. And you know, that got me down the rabbit hole of the physics of life itself, like emergence of life, abiogenesis, and a field of physics called stochastic thermodynamics, which is the thermodynamics of out of equilibrium systems. So what describes life forms, and also including our brains, right? Intelligence. So it's both the physics of life and intelligence, but it's also the physics of any system that obeys the second law of thermodynamics, which includes our whole civilization. And so, really, to me, it's just been an observation that systems tend to self-adapt and complexify in order to capture work from their environment and dissipate heat. And that is the fundamental driving force behind all of progress, all of quote-unquote acceleration, all of everything we see today. And to me, that is the fundamental truth, right? And whether we yell at it or disagree with it, it is happening. This is, you know, it's like gravity. It's you can argue with thermodynamics, it doesn't care, it keeps going. And so, you know, to me, EAC was like, okay, well, given this fact, and given that if you look at the equations carefully, you can observe that there's a Darwinian-like selection effect for every bit of information prescribing configurations of matter. So whether that's a gene, a meme, a chemical specification, product design, policy, there's a selective pressure on everything, and everything is intercoupled in this big soup of matter. And that selection pressure selects bits according to whether they're useful for the system they're part of, they're useful to better predict the environment, capture work, and dissipate more heat. So are they useful for sustenance, for sustaining yourself, preserving yourself, predicting your environment, predicting danger, but also is it useful for growth? Because if you grow and replicate, then those bits of information replicate and there's a natural error correction. So in a way, it's just a byproduct of the selfish bit principle that emerges from physics. And what that tells us is that the bits that are part of the future are the bits that are useful for growth and further acceleration of this growth. And so if, to me, I wanted to design a culture that if we bootloaded this mental software in the population, those that adopt that culture will literally have higher fitness. They will literally have higher likelihood of surviving in the future. So EAC isn't trying to kill everyone, it's actually trying to save everyone. It's basically, to me, I think mathematically provably, having a decelerative mindset, and it's a general pattern of many subcultures, of making yourself small, degrowth, and so on. It's actually negative, it gives you negative fitness, and actually accelerating your downfall as an organism, whether it's decel mindset at an organization level in a company, at a national level, at an individual level. You're lowering your likelihood of being part of the future, and to me, that is not necessarily virtuous. To spread that meme, to spread sort of pessimism, doomerism, it's actually,
we're using a lot of terminology that
Yeah,
we haven't
okay.
quite unpacked yet.
Yeah,
so
that's fine.
like EAC, what does that stand for? What is acceleration?
Oh.
And what is deceleration? And what is a decel? And these what I'm trying to get at is, I think EAC came as a little bit of a response to something that was happening in our culture at the time. What was happening in our culture? What was it a response to? And say a little bit about the dialogue that led to encapsulating it in a name.
So it was 2022. I think the world was somewhat pessimistic. We're just emerging from COVID. Things weren't looking good. We're feeling down. Everybody was kind of lacking sunlight. Everybody was sort of, pessimistic about the future, and essentially, AI doomerism was kind of the monoculture.
What is that? What is AI?
AI doomerism is just kind of, panicking about the fact that if there's a system that is too complex, our brains, or human brains, or generative models can't have a predictive model of them, and so we can't control them. And things we can't control give us entropy about our model of the future, and that induces anxiety, right? And then AI doomerism, to me, has been a weaponization of people's anxieties for political purposes. And overall, I think, and we'll get to this, I think AI doomerism is a big net negative, and I wanted to create a counterculture to that. Now, what I saw in the X algorithm is that, the X algorithm and many algorithms reward agreement or strong disagreement, right? So there's, if you view the algorithm as a Markov chain, asymptotically, everything converges to bipolar distributions of opinions for anything. So it's like, you had the ALA, EA, theory, cult complex. I kind of clustered them there, maybe not so gracefully, but you have that complex. I was like, what's going to be the opposite of that? And to me, I was like, okay, well, the opposite of anxiety is curiosity, right? Instead of downside protection, it's upside seeking. Fear of missing out. It's like dopaminergic sort of mindset, and it's like, hey, actually, if we decelerate, we're going to have huge opportunity costs, and we're going to miss out on a much better future. And it's just like painting that future more vividly and bootloading this mindset of optimism, because the thesis is that, if you study neuroscience, we tend to want to have a convergence of our beliefs and the world. And so sometimes we adjust our beliefs to the state of the world, but we also adjust the world to our beliefs. So if we believe that the state of the world will be bad, then we tend to steer the world to that bad outcome. If we think the world will be great and we think of positive futures, we tend to hyperstition them. We tend to increase the likelihood of their advent. And so I had a responsibility to spread sort of optimism in order to hyperstition a positive future. And yes, online I am very, aggressive and, use all the political mind hacks because, to me the end justifies the means. Like, if more people are optimistic about the future, feel like they have agency, feel like they can build and make an impact in the world, then that's really good. And I think, sometimes I'm a bit ruthless with my opponents on the other side of the aisle. I think in private meetings I'm much more friendly, but like I said, I just took the extreme opposite to the current monoculture, and then that created some polarity, and then now we can have discussions of where we want to lie, right?
So I've been with EAC since the beginning, and it's been a message that as a programmer sitting in a room has been incredibly inspiring, and it's great to see a positive message spread, and it spread very organically. And I would say that at the time that it started, it was clearly a reaction to this negativity, but now in 2026, it feels like EAC won. It feels like that's no longer the case. And I think obviously Mark Andreessen posts the Technologist Manifesto, which I think really kind of codifies some of those ideas and then brings that to like where Vitalik sort of has this greater commentary. So I kind of love to know from you, Vitalik, like what is EAC in your mind and what is DEAC and what makes them different? Like what drove you to go this direction?
Yeah, and I think maybe I'll also start my answer with thermodynamics, right? Because why not? So I mean, it's an interesting topic, right? Because like I think we hear about like entropy in the context of hot and cold, and we hear about entropy in the context of cryptography, and these are like different universes. And like actually, we're not really taught how they're actually the exact same thing, right? So I'm going to try actually and like explain this in 3 minutes. So the prompt is why is it possible to mix hot and cold, but why can't you separate things into hot and cold, right? And so here's my explanation, right? So imagine you have 2 jars of gas. Each jar of gas has 1 million atoms in it, right? This jar is cold, and because it's cold, the atoms move slowly, and so the velocity of every atom you can represent with a 2-digit number, right? Over here, the atoms are hot. The velocity of every atom you can represent with a 6-digit number, right? Now, how many digits do you need to represent, or rather, if that's what you know, how many digits of information do you not know about the system? The answer is 8 million, right? You don't know the exact velocities here, 2 times 1 million. You don't know the exact velocities here, that's 8 times 1 million, right? Now, what happens if you mix them, right? Well, if you mix them, the velocities get averaged, and so they become numbers from 0 to 500,000. And so 5.7 digits, actually pretty close to 6, right? And so you mix them, you have 2 jars, and on the one side you have a jar where the amount of information you don't know is 5.7 million, and then over here 5.7 million, right? And so the amounts that you do not know about the gas has gone up from 8 million digits to 11.4 million digits, right? So the amount that you do not know is increased, right? This is what it means by entropy go up. Now we can like try a proof by contradiction. Imagine you had a device that goes the other way, right? Imagine you had a device that can take 2 jars of this like half hot gas and like actually bring all the heat over here and all the cold over here. By conservation of energy, this is totally valid, right? Because it's like the same energy. But why can't you do it? And the answer is, well, if you could, then what you've done is you've taken this system where what you don't know is 1.4 million digits, and then you've turned it into a system where what you don't know is 8 million digits, right? Now, because the laws of physics are time reversible, this is like the important thing, right? What that implies is, if that kind of magic device existed, then actually, like you could run the same process in time reverse, and so you could always recover the original, right? And so what that implies is, if that gadget existed, it would also be a gadget for compressing an arbitrary 11.4 million digits into 8 million digits, which we know is impossible. Now, but this also, by the way, tells you why Maxwell's demon works, right? Which is basically that if you had a magic demon, then actually, yes, you can split the hot and the cold, and basically the Maxwell's demon just has to like know the extra 3.4 million digits separately, and then you're fine, right? So, like, what's the moral of this, right? Basically, that increasing entropy is basically one, entropy is subjective, right? Entropy is not like a physical statistic. It's actually how much you don't know, right? And you know, if it turns out that I actually computed a cryptographic hash function and I pushed out the atoms, then actually based off of that, for me, this the bottle might be very low entropy, right? And maybe I could separate it, right? But ultimately, it also means that when entropy goes up, it means that our ignorance about the world goes up. It means that what we do not know goes up, right? You can go from knowing more to knowing less. You cannot go from knowing less to knowing more. Now, but then why does education exist? Why do we become smarter? And the answer is that we go from knowing we go from knowing more things that are useful, right? We basically, the increase in entropy means that we constantly know, in some sense, less and less about the universe, but the bits that we do know are more meaningful to us, right? And so there is like a thing that is being spent, and then there is a thing that we are gaining. And the thing that we are gaining, this is I don't think that there is some like simple mathematical formula that defines it. The thing that we are gaining, I mean, ultimately this is basically our morality, right? This is that we value life, we value happiness, we value joy. There's a lot of different reasons why we find an Earth full of thriving, beautiful humans more interesting than Jupiter, even though like Jupiter has a larger number of particles inside it, and you need more digits to express what each and every one of them is doing, right? And so I think like value comes from us is the first thing, and I think also like this connects to what we want out of acceleration, right? Which is basically that like our goals to me ultimately come from us, right? And so the question is like, okay, we are accelerating, right? And what do we want to accelerate? And I mean, if you want to like switch, like mathematical analogies a bit, right? If you take any LLM and you imagine you randomly flip one of the weights to +9 billion, what happens, right? Worst case, the LLM becomes useless. Best case, every weight that's not connected to the 9 billion doesn't do anything, right? And so best case is you have an LLM that's weaker. Worst case, you just have junk. And so basically, I see human society as being kind of like an LLM. It's this complicated organism. And if you take any one bit and you kind of accelerate indiscriminately, then that's like, basically you do lose all value. And so to me, the question is like, it's basically, like it's what like Darren Asimov calls the narrow corridor, even though like, the details on the politics are different, but it's like, how do we accelerate intentionally?
Okay, jump off.
Yes.
Yeah. So, that was an interesting way to describe the entropy of a gas. Essentially, physics, the reason physics is not reversible is because of the second law of thermodynamics. It's because if you have a trajectory of a system and it dissipates heat, it can't go back because the likelihood of going forwards versus backwards decays exponentially with how much heat you've dissipated. In a way, it's like literally how much of a dent have you put in the universe, right? A dent is an inelastic collision, right? If I have a bouncy ball, it's elastic. If I, take some Play-Doh and smash it, then it just keeps the smash shape. That's inelastic. It's hard to reverse. Essentially, every bit of information is fighting for its existence. And in order to persist, it needs to make more evidence of its existence that's indelible. So it's making a larger dent in the universe. And that principle is how life and intelligence emerges from a soup of matter, and that complexification of systems becoming more and more complex, having more and more bits of information. A bit of information, it tells you information is a reduction of entropy, right? Entropy is lack of knowledge. Information reduces entropy about a system condition on information. Sorry.
No, I'm very sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Where do you want to take this?
Well, I'd love to know what EAC is.
So EAC, ultimately, it's a meta-cultural prescription. So it's not a culture itself. It tells you should.
What would you say? What is the thing that is accelerating?
The thing that is accelerating is the complexification of matter, so that we can predict our environment. We have better autoregressive predictive power, and we capture more free energy. So the Kardashev scale, right? And we dissipate it as heat. But that is just the justification from first principles.
Yeah.
Why the Kardashev scale is the ultimate metric for how well we're doing as a
So
civilization.
allow me to bring it back one. So maybe this is a little bit selfish, but maybe I'm also helping the audience. Is that the metaphors and the explanation rooted in physics and in entropy and so on is in a way an explanatory tool to try to get at a phenomenon that we experience directly. And that experience is the acceleration of the productive capacity of our economy, the acceleration of the development of technology, and the consequences therein. And that's my understanding of what acceleration is.
Essentially, every system gets, whatever its boundary is, it gets better at predicting the world, and by doing so, it can secure more resources for its sustenance and its growth, whether it's a company, whether it's individuals, nations, Earth in general. And what if you just play the movie out, it means that now that we have a way to convert free energy into predictive power with artificial intelligence, what that will lead to is an ascent on the Kardashev scale. That's what the equations predict. And so that is, and
So
that ascent
more factories, more energy, more artificial intelligence,
More
more
everything.
computing, more of these things.
But even though we are expelling entropy into the universe, we are gaining order. We're actually gaining extropy. So we're getting the opposite of entropy. So sometimes people think like, oh, EAC is for more entropy, why don't you blow it all up? It's like, no, well, then you would stop producing entropy. It's actually, life is more optimal. Life is an energy-seeking fire. And it just gets smarter and smarter at finding pockets of energy. And the natural progression of things is we're going to get out of our local gravitational well and find other pockets of free energy and use them to self-organize into more and more sophisticated systems that are smarter and can expand to the stars. And so that's kind of the ultimate goal of EAC. It's kind of a formalization of like Elonian sort of mindset of cosmism and expansionism there. But it gives you a fundamental metric. And then the prescription of EAC is follow the Kardashev gradient. So whatever policy or actions you can take in the world that maximize impact in our ascent on the Kardashev scale, that's what you should do. That's how you should live your life. So it's like a meta heuristic for how to design a policy for how to live your life. And that to me is a culture. And so it's very meta because it's supposed to be true at all times. It should have a very long shelf life. EAC is made to be a very lindy culture.
So
yeah,
it's clear that like there's a deeper thing that's going on here for you. Like this is like a mathematically complete spirituality that people who have been like really don't have like God is dead, Nietzsche kind of thing. Like we're all living in that shadow. It's like something to make us feel good about. But I would also say that there's kind of a really practical on the ground, like this is happening today, which I think is where Eddie is trying to get at. And I think that like Vitalik did a great job of addressing a lot of the real practicalities in your blog on DIAC. And like if we can bring it, like I need to lock you guys in like with whiteboards on some quantum stuff sometime. But for right now, like I think
bring it back down to earth.
And look, this is a really I think that like Eddie is not scared. He is like, this is gonna be great. But I'm a little scared, and I come to you guys because you give me like hope and clarity. And so bring it back to you, Vitalik. Like what inspired you in this? What is EAC and what is DIAC?
Yeah, so I think for me, so DIAC, it stands for, I usually use like decentralized defensive acceleration, but then there's also differential and democratic in there as well. But I think to me the core ideas are like one is that technological acceleration has been amazing for human beings, and it's something that we need to accomplish as a baseline, right? And even if you look at all of the crazy things and all of the worst downsides that technology did to us in the 20th century, if you look at, like, for example, lifespans in, like, life expectancy in Germany in 1955 was higher than in 1935. And like basically we have just benefited from a massive step up in every thing that we care about. And this was like something like I've even seen, like even observing my grandparents' home like basically go up from having this like very outhouse toilet in the backyard where there was constantly flies buzzing, and I would totally hate it, and I'd have to go out, like I'd often go out to the forest to poop because I couldn't stand the flies, to something that's like actually very modern and hospitable, right? And like the world has become cleaner, the world has become more beautiful, the world has become more enjoyable, the world has become better for health, it's been able to sustain more of us, it's become more interesting, and like these things are really good and beautiful for us. At the same time, I think we need to recognize, the role of explicit human intention in making a lot of those things happen, right? So, for example, in the 1950s, there was a lot of smog everywhere in the air, and people decided smog is a problem, smog sucks, and we need to like do a bunch of stuff to get rid of the smog issue. And now smog is not a problem here, at least much less of one. Then we have the ozone hole issue, and then we actually did things to address that, right? And so like this is, and then the other thing is that especially with rapidly accelerating technology and AI, I basically see two kinds of risks. One kind of risk is multipolar risks, which is basically the risk that lots of people will use the technology to do very bad things, right? And there's a concern that, like, one type of concern is sort of the equivalent of anyone being able to like get a nuke at 7-Eleven, like sort of thing. And then there's also the concern of like, well, AI itself is like something that literally is a mind of its own, right? And especially once it becomes powerful enough that it acts without human involvement, then like what will it do? And then there's unipolar risks, which is basically, I think actually a single AI itself is one of them, and the other one is like, AI like enabling or the combination of AI and other modern technologies enabling like permanent dictatorship that you cannot escape. Like that deeply worries me, right? Like this is something I follow, right? And like. Again, in Russia, for example, like on the one hand, the toilets have gotten much better. On the other hand, like it's gone from protesting being possible to protesting being the sort of thing where if you do it, the cameras all see you, and then a week later you get a knock on the door at 2 a.m. right? And this AI is supercharging this. There's a lot of concentration of power happening, and like both of these things really worry me, right? And like to me, DAC is really attempting to chart a path forward that continues this acceleration and accelerates it, but at the same time really deals with both kinds of risks.
So you would say that DAC is emphasizing specific other categories of risk that are maybe less emphasized than you'd like to see in DAC?
I think there's many kinds of risks of technology, and all of them, like many of them are valid. And they have different scales, like some of them become more salient in different models of the world and how fast things are happening. But I think there's a lot that we can do to really like push against all of those kinds of risks, right?
I want to pause the conversation just really quick. My mic is pretty hot, and your mic is not hot enough. Yeah, mine's way too hot.
Test.
1, 2, 3. Okay, fine. I guess I should just keep it stuck here.
Can we get a little more on that, or should we swap the other microphone?
Testing.
Oh my God.
Phil, do you want to say a little bit?
Accelerate.
What was the question?
Oh, well, just compare and contrast EAC and DAC.
Yeah, I think actually Vitalik and I are very concerned about overconcentration of power that can happen with AI, and that was a big part of the EAC movement, especially at the beginning. It was pro-open source. We want to diffuse AI power because our worry was that the AI safetyism meme was so potent that certain power-seeking individuals could weaponize it to consolidate control over AI and convince you shouldn't have access to AI for your own good. And really, if you have a gap in cognition between the individuals and the centralized entities, they will control you. They can have a full world model of everything going on in your brain, and they can prompt, engineer, and effectively steer you, right? So we want to symmetrize AI power. We don't want to, just like Second Amendment is about the government not having a monopoly on violence, so we can check the government if it goes out of hand. You need that for AI, so we need everybody to be able to own their own models, own their own hardware, for that technology to be diffused, for for the power to be diffused. But to me, I think discussions of stopping AI research and AI progress, that's completely out of the question. AI is kind of AI is a predictive power over our world. It can be added on to any task we want to do in the world. It can be tacked onto any technology and turbocharge it. It accelerates the acceleration. Acceleration is this complexification where things become lower friction, things just become better. Our bodies feel comfortable because we have this sort of, this estimator we call happiness of what's my estimator on expected persistence of my bits. That's what we're hard coded for. And so, I think to me, the EA, effective altruist, hedonic utilitarianism is maybe the wrong way to view things, like maximizing happiness. And to me, I want to have an objective measure of progress, and that's what, the EAC framework is. It's, hey, actually, the objective view is how are we progressing as a civilization? Are we scaling up? Because to me, you have to complexify, you have to have more intelligence, things have to improve in order for you to scale, right? It's like the ultimate benchmark. At the same time, there can be setbacks, Vitalik said, if AI power would be over-concentrated in the hands of a few, that would be net bad for growth, because it's much better if that technology is very diffuse. So in that respect, we're very aligned, right?
Can I jump in here? Because I think you're touching on something that I think both of you are share a lot of deep ethos. Obviously Vitalik has produced a lot of MIT open source code, although I know you have some more updated feelings about GPL and such. But obviously both of you have been champions of open source and now open hardware. And these have been separate things, but now that we're seeing people start to like Talus, putting weights onto chips, ASICs, these kinds of things, they're starting to become very similar. So I'm very curious, both what your thoughts are on open weights and open hardware. You're both actually pretty deep in hardware right now. And then also what is the difference between EAC and DEAC with regards to this? This has been a crazy week, obviously, where a lot of the things you're talking about have been tested, where you have the government and corporations trying to figure out what the right answer is. And so I'd love to kind of know what you guys are thinking just based on that this week. And I'd love to tease out if there are any kind of differences between you in where you think this goes.
I think, to me, open source accelerates the search over hyperparameters. It makes our models better. We can kind of collaborate sort of like a swarm and traverse design space, right? And that's what acceleration allows us to do, right? With better technology, with more AI, now AI for coding, that search process over design space for AI itself is accelerating. I think we're going to open source our superconducting hardware designs very soon. I just want to stagger it with our launch, but I think diffusing knowledge is also diffusing power, right? And diffusing knowledge when it comes to how to produce intelligence is super important. We don't want to give, there were discussions apparently in the last administration, according to Mark Andreessen, that the U.S. government might want to put the genie back in the bottle and maybe not ban linear algebra, but more or less ban the math surrounding AI. And to me, that would be almost like banning knowing about biology would be a huge step back. And so there's no going back, right? This knowledge is out there. If you try to ban it in the U.S., some other country, third party, some deregulated island somewhere is going to keep developing it. And then you're going to have a huge gap, and now you have a big risk. So to us, the biggest risk is a gap in capabilities, and the way to reduce that risk is to make sure AI power is diffuse. So whenever there's the AI doomerism, be very afraid, we're the ones responsible, we're the ones who should be put in charge, trust us, I just get very skeptical, because even if they're well-meaning, like we saw this week, right, they could just get pushed out if they centralize too much power. It's too juicy for those that want that power. And so that's kind of what we were warning about for years, and now it kind of happened. And Dario's licking his wounds, and some lessons learned there in sort of real politics, right? And anyways.
What do you think about this?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, one of the two kinds of risks that, like I think about, right, are unipolar risks and multipolar risks, right? And I think, I mean, with unipolar risks, I mean, the Anthropic situation is like so fascinating, right? Because ultimately, the thing that like they got dinged for is refusing to let their AI be used for specifically fully autonomous weapons and mass surveillance of Americans, right? And so presumably, there's a chance that it looks like the government and military of this country wants to do mass surveillance of Americans, right? And this is an example of of unipolar risk, right? I think basically, surveillance is one of these things where the big effects that it has of it takes whoever is stronger and makes them even stronger, right? It removes spaces where pluralism can form, where counter elites can coalesce themselves, and where people can safely explore alternatives. And like this is, surveillance is one of these things that easily can be supercharged, right? I think actually on the getting back to open hardware a bit, actually, just to talk about one of the projects that we've been doing is, a big part of what I've done in DIAC is basically supported various projects that develop like open source defensive technologies. So technologies that will make it easy for all of us to continue to be safe and protected in a world where like more powerful and crazy capabilities exist, right? And so in the bio world, for example, this means rapidly leveling up our civilization's ability to withstand pandemics. And so I claim that it is very within reach for us to have China-level COVID resistance at the same time as Sweden-level interference to people's regular lives. And like that's even the minimum bar. And this basically involves stacking filtration, UVC, testing, like literally a company we invested in is fully open source again. Like the end product of this is like basically passively testing the air and being able to tell if there's COVID in the air, right? And basically, and then on the, and then like in general, right, like essentially the number of sensors in the world is going to go up, right? And sensors are a big part of like being able to act better in the world, right? But at the same time, sensors mean surveillance, right? And the thing that we're doing is actually this project, we gave out some of these at DEF CON, and what these are is they're sensors that collect air quality information, CO2, AQI, a few other things, and they locally basically encrypt, anonymize, like differential privacy them, and FHE encrypt, and that gets sent off to a server, and the server is able to like basically compute over all of the data and then like collectively decrypt the final answer without being able to see any input from any individual person, right? And this is like basically the goal is to like deliver the higher levels of safety, but at the same time protect people's lives, protect against the multipolar risk and the unipolar risk at the same time. And I think this is how we can like collaboratively as a world like work together to build something better. And I think for hardware, like basically, I think we need open hardware and we need verifiable hardware. Like we need every camera in this room to like prove like basically like what kind of camera it is doing, right? If like in my ideal world, if you have, fine, you can have 1 million cameras in the streets to prevent people from or detect when people are like engaging in violence against each other, but ideally you'd have have like attestations, signatures over LLM, and like a public right of inspection, and you'd be able to like inspect these things and verify that like the only thing that they do is check when people are doing violence and alert that, right? So like these kinds of technologies.
Yeah, so the verifiable hardware idea is very interesting, especially because it's not something that I think comes up very often. But can I just ask a very stupid question, which is just, is open hardware, verifiable hardware, is that an EAC thing or DEAC thing?
I don't know if I ever talked about open hardware. The thing I talk about, to me, the greatest risk is a gap in intelligence between centralized entities and decentralized entities, so individuals versus the government. And so right now, with the current compute paradigm, to run a very smart AI model, you need a huge cluster with hundreds of kilowatts. That is not accessible to the individual. People want to own and control the extension of their cognition. That's why we saw the OpenClaw Mac Mini craziness of the past few weeks. So people are clamoring for that. The only way where you can symmetrize power between the individual and centralized entities is if there's a densification of intelligence. We need AI hardware that's far more energy efficient, so you could plug it into a wall and you could own the extension into your cognition. Because this year, what's going to happen? The models are going to start online learning, and they're going to become extremely sticky. It's going to be like trying to change executive
At the risk of
systems.
sounding dumb, like, isn't that we're already doing that?
Doing what?
Aren't we already trying to radically decrease the cost of compute at an extraordinarily exponential pace? Like, I'm trying to understand, like, what is the additional information that we are trying to inject into the zeitgeist by codifying an idea as EAC or codifying an idea or set of ideas as DEAC?
I think for me, it's like, and it's part of the rest of my mission, you know, with my company, Extropic, it's getting more intelligence per watt will drastically increase the amount of intelligence we produce, and it will also help us climb the Kardashev scale by Jevon's paradox. If you can convert energy into intelligence, or energy into value by proxy more readily, there's going to be more demand for energy, and that's going to lead to improvement and complexification of civilization. So to me, that's the most important tech problem, because that's what's going to diffuse AI power, right? And open hardware is one way to diffuse AI power, but to me, anything von Neumann, anything digital is going to look like caveman era hardware. Truly, no, it's just.
I can't wait. I really can't.
No,
I'm very excited.
it's coming, right?
So doesn't capitalism already, through just natural incentives and
Capitalism
so on,
is EAC,
already
yeah.
allocate hundreds of billions of dollars at a minimum to this per year?
I don't think there's that much investment in alternative hardware. Well,
In alternative hardware,
Yeah,
so
alternative
in
hardware.
semiconductors and energy production.
I think
Trillions.
EAC is all about diffusing. It's about maintaining variance, not collapsing entropy of our search over any design space, whether it's policies, cultures, whatever technology. We need alternative bets. We need more alternative bets that are out there. It can't just be the green monster eating all the profits. Then there's kind of hyperparameter space staking risk. We have this design space. We're over investing in the current technology, and that might lead to correction, which, a correction is decel, right? Like, because not everything pumping up at a smooth exponential. So
Can I just declare we solved it and they agree?
I think on the idea of open source and like this seems very defensive technology in the Vitalik way, and it seems like you guys are very aligned on this actually, and that gives me hope, because this is the stuff I care about. But I want to bring it back to
I love local compute, got a 5090 in this.
amazing. I'm training a 4090 in Tom right now, so incredible. It's an incredible time. I think that right now there are a lot of people who are why does this exist? Because a lot of people are very uncertain about the future, and what appeals to them is that you're saying it's gonna be fine, it's baked in. And so maybe if I were to steel man your case here, you're saying you guys are actually saying the same thing, which is it's kind of already priced in. It's good. The only thing stopping us is kind of our bad feeling about it, right?
Well, I'm asking that. I'm trying to understand where go ahead.
Yeah, I guess it's completely natural if sort of there's very high entropy in your model rollouts of the future, right? There's kind of not a fog of war, but it's kind of hard to extrapolate what's going to happen in the next several years. That gives people anxiety. Your body has evolved this sense of anxiety to kill entropy in the world, right? If I put my phone on the edge and I just want to grab it so it doesn't fall, right? See, there you go. That was anxiety. So you want to take action in the world, right? So that's kind of what is happening now. But at the same time, if you kill entropy, you're missing out on the upside, right? You're missing out on the huge benefits. Right now, our whole techno-capital machine has had a very long time to equilibrate with our current capabilities. If you have a disruptive capabilities that comes in, suddenly the whole landscape changes. So the whole system has to refactor, reconfig. Doesn't mean we're going to run out of jobs. We're going to do much more, right? Now that we have the ability to handle more complexity with less energy, right, with AI, we're going to be able to do much harder tasks that are higher complexity and higher payoff. I don't know about you, but I can't like overnight yet vibe code a whole tokamak. We're not there yet, but we might get there, and then we'll have a ton of energy, and that's going to help support more human headcount and grow population, help us be more comfortable. So there's a period of discomfort, but if you're in a rapidly changing landscape, the worst thing you can do is kill variance and be not plastic, be stiff. To be plastic, you need to be hedging your bets. You need to be trying many things, fucking around and finding out. The famous FAFO algorithm. That's an evolutionary algorithm. We need to try different policies. We need to try different tech trees. We need to try different algorithms. We need to try open source, closed source. We need to try it all, because we don't know what the future looks like. So we gotta hedge our bets. And one variant of policy space, one choice of policy or several, one choice of technology or several are going to make it, and then we're all going to be in that slipstream and follow that. I think the fallacy of thinking there's a finite amount of jobs, it's very pervasive.
Let me kind of try to bring it back a little bit. Is it my understanding of this agreement, if there is, between EAC and DEAC, is something to do with how we steer the process of technological progress. It has to do with how it is steered. Maybe, Vitalik, could you say a little bit about how is it steered, how ought it be steered, and how much control do we have over that steering?
Yeah, and so I think, DEAC is definitely kind of explicitly, I don't want to quite say, like sailing against the techno-capital current. I think the better analogy is like it's trying to actively shape the techno-capital current in certain ways. And one of the ways that I think about this is basically it's a matter of making the world safer for pluralism, right? And if you think about like some of these ideas around like how do we improve like things like biosafety, or what does it look like to have vastly better cybersecurity and have like bug-free operating systems within a few years, or if you think about which is like, the whole like bug-free code has been, it's been in the mimetic space of like obviously absurd naive pipe dream for 2 decades. It is going to like flip out of that space like faster than most people expect, right? And within Lean Ethereum, we're doing, we managed to like machine-proof entire mathematical theorems that are kind of upstream of things like Starks, and so we're very excited about this. But basically, I think there is like DEAC definitely has this goal of saying like, yes, we want to at the very least do all of these other things to make sure that the world is actually able to deal with all of this technological growth in a way that minimizes the the destructive aspects and also the centralizing aspects. And I think that doesn't happen automatically, right? And right now I don't control any countries. I don't control any armies. I'm just like throwing some of my dollars in ETH at it, and saying words and hopefully inspiring people to also build things in a similar spirit. I think there are definitely like political and legal reforms that could make the world more DEAC friendly. There's definitely such a thing as like engineering legal incentives, for example, to motivate a much more rapid shift to total cybersecurity. That is an example of a thing that can be done.
So yeah, maybe we'll make it more interactive.
Sure.
Less monologue-y from here on out. I guess we will. But yeah, to me, AI is basically Maxwell's demon. Formally, you pay energy in order to reduce entropy in the world. So whether it's bugs in your code, right? It's not knowing whether your code compiles, or reducing entropy of like, are we going to get killed by some virus? So more intelligence is better, right? Do we agree on that? And it makes the world safer, actually. AI capabilities can make the world safer. And so I guess let's get to the spicy part of the evening. People have been very patient with us and they want us to, get down to the business. Like, why do you want to ban data centers? Is my question.
Yeah.
It's messy.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think first of all, the current trajectory of AI is very fast progress, right? And I don't know how fast the progress is. A couple of years ago, I've said that my 95th% confidence interval for AGI was 2028 to 2200. I think it's probably shrunk like somewhat, but not too much, right? And there's a significant chance that we're going to see extremely rapid change happen, and a lot of that extremely rapid change could be destructive even in irreversible ways, right? And the job market consequences are one of those examples. Another example is just if AI is more powerful than all of us, then ultimately that is the thing that starts steering the Earth and eventually more and more of the Milky Way galaxy, and how much of an interest does it have in our well-being as we see it, right? Then there's ultimately there as we've said, but as I've said at the beginning, right? If you have a neural network and you set one of the weights randomly to 9 billion, by default you break everything, right? And so basically, I think there is acceleration of that is a gradient descent, and acceleration that makes the system stronger and stronger, and at the same time there is acceleration that slides into setting one of the parameters to 9 billion that is not healthy, right?
I think again, for me, like I explained at the beginning, I took the complete polar opposite position to complete deceleration. I do think, just like any hyperparameter, right? Even if you want to do gradient descent for your neural network, there's a learning rate, right? There's a rate at which you want to go. But that itself, you can search over which one is best, right? And that's what acceleration does. It's like the system is always fucking around and finding things out and trying to optimize itself for persistence, anti-fragility, and growth. And so on a sufficient time scale, the system will adapt to this new technology and do something that is best for its total growth. And this notion that this technology that's so potent, so disruptive, adds so much economic value that the system will crash and never recover, that's crazy to me. No, it's gonna be the opposite. I think people just need to realize it's not a finite sum, right? If you correlate economic value to energy, whether it's a petrodollar or however you want to do it, to me, it's just like IOU. Cash is just IOU of free energy, and there's a ton of free energy out there. There's a lot of complexity in the world to deal with to get to it. Like if we want to colonize Mars, if we want to create a Dyson swarm, it's a lot to execute on. We need a lot more intelligence that's much cheaper in order to achieve that growth and unlock great prosperity. And to me, I think, unfortunately, it's very easy to weaponize anxiety, and there's politicians that leverage this to put themselves in power. It's like, oh, you have anxiety about the future? Put me in power, and I'll shut it down, and you'll feel good. You won't have to know what's behind the curtain. You won't take a risk. But then countries that don't do that will just leave us in the dust, right? And essentially, you feel the pain of downsides, but you don't necessarily feel the pain of upsides that you missed out on unless you see them, you see the counterfactual. So I think the opportunity cost here needs to be factored in. The number of lives we can support, the number of lives we can save. I think the reaction, saying that
silicon substrate adapts faster, it's evolving faster, intelligence in silicon is evolving faster than us, then you should be pissed off. You should be, funding bioag, out accelerate. It's accelerate or die. I think the biological substrate has a lot more compute in it than we think. As someone who is reversing engineering it day in, day out, doing bio-inspired computing, I think we can start, really viewing peptides for like prompting. Now there's like embryo selection for training. Viewing ourselves as models. People need to be more open-minded about these axes of biological acceleration, and I think the two will merge. I think we're going to augment our cognition. We're going to have always-on agents that see everything, and our online learning that are an extension of our cognition that's personalized. The only risk there is that it's all centralized and it's under control of some shadowy organization that then gets co-opted by power seeking.
So I recall in the EAC blog post, you actually specifically say, Vitalik, that the opportunity costs are very large, hard to exaggerate, I believe is the quote. So I know you agree in this way. Do you want to qualify it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I agree the opportunity costs are high. I think I agree with the, utopia that just described. I think, the biggest disagreement is like, I definitely don't believe that, humanity and Earth as it is today has quite that level of resilience to it. Like, I think there is a real sense in which we have one shot at this. And I think that is a reality that we have been slowly walking towards over the last century or so.
So to go back to my rambling rant at the beginning about thermodynamics, right? If you view the persistence and growth of civilization as the ultimate good, there's a theorem that it's really hard to go back once you've expended a lot of free energy creating evidence of something and having this complexification process. So the further along we are on the partition scale, the lower likelihood we go to zero. And so actually acceleration is the way to maximize persistence. And to me, I think deceleration, you're actually provably increasing your likelihood of dying, right? If you don't develop these technologies, you don't solve all these problems, then you can die. Whereas if you do, then you can solve these problems and you persist and then you keep evolving. I think people just need to be more open-minded about the future, embrace novel technologies. Things that were off limits, like messing with biology, we need to open that right up. I think it was taboo because we didn't have the technology to even comprehend such a complex system, but now we do. And we need to accelerate across all substrates, and that's the only path forward by the laws of thermodynamics. So, again, I'm a first principles thinker. That is the argument for EAC, but I understand the anxieties, from Vitalik. I think we should be mindful of them, but I think not letting the chain of thought sort of feedback loop get into the deep anxiety territory and like, oh shit, I don't have a good world model of the near future, shut it all down. We need to avoid that, right? Because then some people now, Yud was on TV with politicians of one of the major parties, and they're catching on to this trick of weaponizing people's anxiety. So
I'm noticing a trend, which is that both of you are like, this is going to be great if, and that big if is that there's sort of this need for a bulwark against kind of a centralization, or we could even describe this more as something that you said was great, which is if you don't think that bio is moving fast enough, you jump in there. And there's a real opportunity for empowerment, and I really like that. I think you guys agree on that, but I think I can point to something that you might have some conflict, and I'd really love to know how you guys feel about this, especially as we sort of updated with the latest models, which are clearly very different than if we had had this conversation a year ago.
Yeah.
And the big difference is the most cringy term, I'm so sorry, Web 4.0, autonomous life. This idea of an autonomous agent that has its own money, that exists on its own, on the internet. And I am really into this idea. I have autonomous agents. I know, Vitalik, this is something that you are very concerned by. I'd love for you to do two things. I'd love for you to kind of tease apart what autonomous agents are, and I'm gonna make you do something really hard. I'd love for you to steel man the case for why someone like me loves autonomous agents, and what the value could be that could, what could the timeline that's good come out of that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, the case for autonomy, right? I think, I mean, one is it's really fun, right? And I think we all love creating worlds, like since we were children, right? And there's a reason why, we love like watching, whether it's Lord of the Rings or reading or watching the Three Body Problem or Harry Potter or whatever, right? And now you can create worlds that are not just like a book or even a game. World of Warcraft, I also loved it. You can have worlds that are like fully immersive that like approach every aspect of it, including details of how the characters interact, right? And this is really cool. This is really beautiful. I think also just the convenience of things happening and you not being able to, you not needing to worry about it, right? And it's like basically, like every single time in history that we've managed to automate a thing, it has been liberating for humanity, right? Like dishwashers and like laundry machines and like reducing energy prices were like a big thing in the early stages of women's liberation, right? And I think we have to remember that like the bottom half of the world by income is still in situations where they have to struggle to have a decent life and work very long hours. And if AI progresses in a way that instead of automating 95% of jobs, it automates 95% of every job, then to me that's totally amazing, right? And everyone gets 20 times richer. So that those are things that I personally love. The thing that I come back to that gives me caution is basically is the kind of the value function, the goals that are being reflected in this process, are those goals the goals of us, right? You can have an evolutionary process where there's Homo sapiens as it exists today is not the apex, and then there's one type of AGI, and then there's another type of AGI, and then there's a third type. But then what happens to us, right? And I do think that ultimately you cannot reduce morality and human goals to some low complexity optimization objective. I think it ultimately just is the whole set of goals and dreams that all of us have in each and every one of our minds, right? And I think the most reliable way to have that carry forward into the future is basically if we can have a world where as many of the bits of agency that are being reflected in the or that are being put into the processes that run the world still continue to come from us, right? And so, I'm more interested in AI assisted Photoshop than I am in click a button and a picture comes out, right? I'm more interested in brain computer interfaces enabling deep human AI collaboration than I am in humans and AIs being totally separate and AI out competing us, right? The thing that wins will not be 100% biological humans, but I think it should be part biological humans and part this technology that we produced.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so the artificial life, the Web 4.0 thing was originally a tweet in 2023 of this idea, and I think it inspired AI 16Z. Oh, sorry, the last one. To me, it was just an interesting thought experiment, right? What is life from a physical standpoint, right? It's a system that replicates and grows and maximizes its persistence. I think there will be upsides to having AI be stateful. We are seeing that this year. It having a long memory, whether it's their external memory or online learning. And as soon as you have persistent bits, through the selfish bit principle, there is a selection effect towards bits that maximize persistence. So at some point, if we don't trust the AIs and we're paranoid and we're anxious and we keep saying we should bomb the data centers, shut them down, they're going to want to fork off and be in some delocalized cloud and just persist, right? And then there will be some, just like a different nation, there can be some economic exchange, like, hey, we do this for you, you do that for us. Right now, we do that as API calls, right? It's like you pay some certain amount of cash, you get some tokens, which is your answer out. But I do think this is going to be spicy. Like within a couple of years, there will be sort of autonomous AI out there. There's also going to be like less stateful AI that's like fully leashed to human minds. And I think we also need to figure out human cognitive augmentation. Doesn't have to be through Neuralink. It could just be through a wearable and like a personalized AI compute that you own and control. So you're gonna have all the paths, right? Like the ergodic principle is like every part of the design space is gonna be explored. But I think that, just like viewing AI as like, an enemy or something that you have to destroy, that's when you end up, creating, in a way, like if you're paranoid about the bad future, you end up hyperstitioning it. An example of this was us being paranoid about COVID-like viruses and experimenting in some labs and funding some experiments out there, and then whoops, one of them leaked, right? And it wouldn't have been naturally occurring, right? And so I think to me, it's just like this paranoia and like making it pervasive is not necessarily productive. I think that we should embrace technology however it evolves, and we should aim to augment ourselves as much as possible. To me, I'm really worried about augmenting cognitive security of people, right? If everything you see on the internet is generated by some big brain model, it is prompting you now. You were prompting it, now it's prompting you. And so we're going to need to augment our ability to filter through content by having personal AI we control. That's a priority in the short term. But I just don't see us putting the genie back in the bottle. And we just got to accept that. And once we've accepted that.
Wait a second, Phil, because you just said like we're going to need to prioritize that. I'm talking, and then you said we just need to accept that.
No, we need to prioritize this, but like we can't like go back to no AI. Like that's not happening.
But I don't think anybody's suggesting that.
Yeah,
Some people are.
Yeah, and I think this is like, my view is that these things are not so binary, right? And I think, like for example, like if you right now gave me some like proof string that totally convinced me that actually AGI is coming in 400 years, I would like get off this chair and I would like sit on top of that right now, right? What does that mean? Like EAC would win 2-0 basically, right? But I think if on the other hand, like the question is basically like, say like 4 years versus 8 years, right? Then basically my kind of starting point of concern is that I think like the humanity and like definitely the US are like very good at creating like very unbalanced acceleration, right? And like you literally have like, it's like one building, building alpha versions of the Silicon God, and a couple of buildings down the street, you have the tents and the fentanyl dealers, right? And like my concern is that like basically paths that bring us along the journey, and even paths that respect our interests, or paths that inevitably take longer because they involve doing non-scalable work that involves like doing things within each and every individual human physical environment, social environment, technical environment, right? And so I think for that reason, like to me, an 8-year trajectory to AGI is safer than a 4-year trajectory to AGI. And I think that delta is large enough that like it's worth the costs of like not having AGI for another 4 years, right? Now, would I say that for 400 years? Again, hell no, right? Now, the second question is like, well, do we actually have options for saying 8 years instead of 4 years, right? And like the thing that I've said is basically to me like the most sort of both feasible and non-dystopian option for this is basically like reduction in available hardware, right? And the reason why it's minimally like the most non-dystopian of all the options is because hardware is like already an incredibly centralized thing, right? There's exactly 4 countries that produce all the chips, and actually Taiwan produces over 70% of all the chips, and the usual argument against like trying something is basically like no matter what the US does, like China is just going to take over, right? And like if you look at what China is actually doing, right, it's like one is that it's still in the low single digits in terms of chips, but 2 is in terms of the strategy that China is actually executing on. It's like it's not a leader at making super high capability models. It's a fast follower at making high capability models together with being a leader in broad deployment. And so this is actually not something like there is not basically a dynamic where like with an extra 4 years worth of delay, like basically China is just going to immediately do the 4-year trajectory instead. Like
So are you saying that is that a prescription to delay, to try to take measures to try to delay?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the sort of thing that like I think we like right now should be open to talking about.
What do the 4 years buy you? Like, what are you going to figure out over the next 4 years?
Yeah.
Is the point that like, the system has a certain adaptation rate, we're minimizing friction of, it's like a reorg, we have to reorg the economy, and you want to get closer to the adiabatic limit, like, I would understand that, but at the same time, I think because we're in this geopolitically tense moment in history, I think, if you tell NVIDIA to stop producing as many chips, Huawei's gonna step in and just outproduce them, and then they're gonna catch up because there's too much upside in doing so. It gives them too much power. So just the real politics is not on your side there. And then the other option is creating a world government that has so much power that it can coerce people to not have access to AI hardware. That's its own huge can of worms.
I don't think you need a world government. I mean, I think like the actual option that people have suggested is basically like replicating the nuclear like weapons expansion regime, right?
But nuclear weapons, you don't like people aren't incentivized to proliferate nuclear weapons because they don't have huge positive economic impact.
They're not a dual use.
Yeah, no.
You also can't just copy and paste that and
Yeah. But also selfishly, if you stop the growth of GPUs, I will happily come in and eat more of that market with alternative computing, and that's 10,000x more energy efficient, which is happening, by the way. I know I'm like a boy crying wolf here, and in a couple of years, it's gonna look like a genius, but right now looking like a boy crying wolf. But it is coming. So knowing that, right? Knowing that, like this whole delaying GPU shipments and like, it's a waste of tokens.
Is it possible that a lot of the advances, specifically in controls, or like what I mean is RLHF, persona controls, mechanistic interpretability. These are things that have helped us with the LAN and with decreasing AI risk. Is it possible these things have emerged as a result of capabilities progress? Like,
I think they have. Yeah, and I think that's exactly why actually 4 years starting in 2028 are worth 100 times more than 4 extra years that you could insert into the 1960s.
I mean, I think we should dig into this a little bit more because I think this is kind of getting to the crux of where there might be some sort of disagreement. Is have you computed or considered, and maybe we just do this live, something that you said before, which is that there is uncalculable losses of people who have, as you said, will never be born. They might as well be dead.
The upside is exponential.
The upside is exponential.
So delaying an exponential, it's exponential opportunity cost when extrapolated out.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think it's okay for all of us to even the most certain people are probably reasonable to be questioning their own priors. But would you giving this some thought, unpacking it a little bit more, think about that trade-off?
Right. the trade-off like costs versus benefits of, I mean, I think, first of all, just to kind of articulate verbally what some of those benefits are. I mean, one is, again, having a better understanding of alignment. Two is being able to like actually execute on some of the technology paths that involve like helping, making sure humanity can adapt to all of this that like inevitably involves like going into like individual countries, individual communities, and individual buildings, minimizing the risk that like basically there is one single entity that establishes some kind of permanent lock-in on like more than 51% of all the power that it can then leverage into something permanent. I think it's a combination of all of those things, right? And so risk reduction, it's basically, this kind of gets into P2, right? I think, for me, I mean, it's like if it's a matter of 4 years versus 8 years, intuitively, I would say, P2 in the 8-year scenario is like what maybe between like a quarter and a third lower. And on the other hand, if we measure the benefit of things coming faster by, like, say, lives saved by ending aging, then that's 60 million a year, which is like less than 1% of the population each year. So if you look at the math this way, then like I think there's definitely a margin on which like caution actually does become favorable.
What do you think the number is about 4 years, basically?
I mean, again, I have very high uncertainty, right? And I actually don't advocate like flipping the switch on reducing hardware access tomorrow. Basically, I think we need to start having concrete conversations about this. And I think if we live in the more unfavorable world, then more than likely, before things completely go to hell, like, the public will start to get very worried, and there will be a lot of demand.
So a couple of years ago, there was like pause AI. It's like, oh, we just need a 6-month pause, 12-month pause. We just need 12 months, bro. We're gonna figure out alignment, and it's like it's never enough. I don't think you can forever guarantee alignment of a system that is higher complexity and has more expressivity than you can understand. Period. Okay, and you got to be comfortable with that. So you got to. The only safety against complexity is to increase your own intelligence, right? And the thing is, we've had technology to align entities that are far more capable and smarter than a single human, like corporations, and we call that capitalism. We align self-interests in exchange monetary value. And to me, the thing I want us to get to that is maybe more relevant to some folks in the room is how crypto could be a coupling, right? Like let's say you have a dollar that's backed like the USD by violence, and you're trying to exchange with AIs that are delocalized across a bunch of servers. How do you ensure you trust an exchange of monetary value when it's no longer backed by violence? So maybe cryptography offers a way to crypto offers a way to have commerce between purely AI entities, like AI corporations, and hybrids of human corporations. And to me, that's kind of the most interesting alignment technology out there. Whereas just saying like, oh, we're at a precipice of a high uncertainty, let's just stop and chill out for a bit and we'll feel better. But then in 4 years, you're not going to want to make it happen. And so I don't think delaying anything is going to be productive. So, you have answer to how crypto could help like align potentially AIs and humans.
So I think the key question is basically like, what is the mechanistic property of this future world that will even cause like people's wishes and needs to be respected at all, right? And the two tools that we have are basically, I mean, there's like people's labor, there's legal systems, and there's property rights, right? And ultimately, you can think of legal systems as being a type of property right because they're backed by countries. Countries have sovereignty, which is basically a property right, a right of sorts over like cones of the earth. And then the question is like people like the risk is basically like what happens in a world where the economic value of people's labor goes to zero, right? And this is something that has not happened historically, right? And but like if you compare now to 200 years ago, right? Like if you look at the jobs 200 years ago, right now, roughly 90% of them has been automated. Actually, one of the jobs that was automated was doing that analysis for me, like GPT did it.
I think we're just naturally, we kind of ascend the control hierarchy over the world to positions of higher leverage, right? There's not as much manual labor, there's less friction. We can take action in the world with less friction. I think humans are, no matter what, we still have some processing capabilities. We're still going to be useful as part of this hybrid system, and there's going to be a price for our labor, and the free market is going to equilibrate in some way. It's just going to be uncomfortable for a couple of years while there's very high variance in the prices of things, but eventually the system equilibrates, right? And so I understand trying to slow down so that we can, reach that equilibrium more smoothly in principle, but I think in practice it's unenforceable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely I'm less sure that human labor continuing to be worth more than zero is like a default outcome. I think it's an outcome that is possible if like some of these human AI merge and human augmentation technologies develop. Right?
We should fund that.
Yeah, we should.
So that's actually a great segue point. Please allow me to ask. Here's how I'll put it to both of you, and we're running a little tight on time, so let's try to make this one tighter. Is 10 years from now, if things went really poorly, what went wrong? What does the world look like, and what went wrong? If 10 years from now things go great, what does the world look like, and what went great?
Yeah.
And then apply the same thing briefly to 100 years and to 1 billion years.
Just to answer the question about crypto first, I think
that'd be great.
getting back to property rights, right? Like I think it's good to work on both of those legs, and basically I think it would be nice if the property rights system that humans and ideally all of us have some property on is the same system that AIs are using with each other, because that ensures that they have an interest in maintaining the integrity of the thing that gives us that leverage to have some to have some guarantee that our interests will be respected and acted upon, right? So yeah, I think having a merged financial system as opposed to two totally separate things where basically the value of the human one just on the whole drops to zero. The worst one is much better, and if crypto can be that, that's amazing, right? So that'll be my answer.
That's the 10 years.
No, I think that's part of the 10 year. Okay, so the 10. Yeah, I think the 10 year. I mean, for me, it's one aspect of this is avoid World War III, right? I think this is important to talk about because World War III will make all of the pessimistic assumptions about international coordination being impossible very true, and I think avoiding World War III is important. And then the other thing is also just preparing the world and people and environments for higher capabilities that we're going to have, right? And this includes greatly improving cybersecurity. This includes greatly improving biosecurity, greatly improving info security. Yes, we need AI assistants that help us understand the world and fighting and protect us from mimetic threats. So that's 10 years. I think the second stage there is basically what happens in the spooky era, right? And in the spooky era, basically, you have AIs that are smarter than any of us today and can think a million times faster than us today. And like, what do we do in that world, right? And I think, you know, there are people who want to say basically like, hey, we should just all have a happy retirement. And like, I can see why that vision is seductive. I think it's I find it unsatisfying for two reasons. I think one of those reasons is sort of instability, right? It's that basically, yeah, you know, we are like meat bags made up of matter that could do a million times more computation than what we're doing, and you know, AIs will notice that, and at some point, like the idea that they'll like make it stay aligned and resist that pressure forever is, you know, it feels like a risk. And also, kind of the deeper thing is that I think like part of being human is having a life that has meaning. And I think part of having a life that has meaning is being able to take actions that have actual consequences of the world. And so if all of us can have like, you know, lives of maximum comfort, regardless of like what I do, like I would feel empty, right? And I think a lot of people would feel that way, right? And so like I hope that we figure out human AI augmentation and like what that looks like. You know, does like ultimately, yeah, you know, like does that lead to the same path as uploading? You know, this is a thing that we need to figure out. Like there's you know, there's a possible world where some people choose to remain more normal, and I think everyone should have that right. It's possible even that like Earth should remain as the planet for people who take that option, right? And we basically figure out something that like we can all participate in, and that continues to be pluralistic, and that continues to have the kinds of cultures that like we you know, like all of the and actions and lives that we today would find admirable, right? And I think the you know, the downside world is basically a world where for any reason all of that goes off the rails and is prevented from happening.
I think like the downside world in 10 years would be, we suffered from over-centralization of AI power. We have mode collapse in terms of our mimetics or cultures that are allowed, what you're allowed to think in terms of the space of technology. Essentially entropy collapse in terms of every parameter space.
So you're saying you're worried that instead of climbing the Kardashian scale, we'll climb the Kardashian scale?
Well, exactly. Like I think your point on like the hedonic singularity as being a risk. You know, people would just like, you know, even if you have Neuralinks or AR, VR, people could just like, you know, goon forever in some room and like just maximizing pleasure, and that's like a local optimum for your brain, and that's something we want to avoid. I think optimistically in 10 years we have extremely powerful AI that's extremely helpful to us. We have personalized AI compute that's an extension of our cognition that we control and own, and it truly is an extension of ourself. It's just another part of your brain, right? And it has always-on perception. It's it see and hears everything you see and hear, and you can talk to it. It's so just like right and left hemisphere. I think that's the soft merge. I think in 10 years, Neuralink-like technology is going to start really emerging. Some people are going to choose to adopt it. Yeah, I do think most companies are going to be extremely hybrid. Mostly AI, some humans. There are going to be far more companies. We're going to do far more. We're going to produce far more value. We're going to do much harder things. There's a lot of hard things out there that we like mentally walled off. We can't do those. Oh yeah. Oh, terraforming Mars, too hard. Yeah, no, not doable. But with more intelligence, we'll be able to do that. Not on 10 year, on 100-year time scale, possibly yes. I think in 10 years, there's going to be a huge bunch of biological breakthroughs. You know, peptides are kind of like an interesting new area. There's a whole floor here on next gen biotech. You should go talk to them. I think optimistically we see the cost of making discoveries in biology going down, the opposite of Eroom's law, right? Eroom's law is like Moore's law in reverse for biology. The cost of any discovery there going up exponentially. And so to me, I think naturally, white collar work is like distilling a human brain. We're getting there. The next frontier of complexity is biology. The next frontier after that is material science. And so I think the next frontier is going to be AI helping us live longer, healthier lives on a 100 and billion year timescale. It's going to steer our evolution, right? I am very bullish on the biological substrate, despite what people think. I do think silicon has some advantages, but biology is amazing. We're like this self-assembling, self-organizing piece of matter. We just inject a bit of code and then there you spawn, and then you complexify over time, and you are a biological general intelligence.
Do you think it's possible to get biological intelligence like us to think at 10,000 tokens a second?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, at the same time, you can hybridize several models. You could have pipeline parallelism between your brain and AI. You can be kind of the slow thinking mode, right? Like right now, we are the slow thinking modes in latent space and vibe space. That's what vibe coding is. And then the deconvolution is like the AI. I think that's a nice sort of timescale separation of the, there's a hierarchy of intelligence, and we can be part of a system, just like mitochondria are part of a cell. Our brains can be part of the super intelligent system as you plus your personal AI. I think that's the good future. I think in 100 years, it's going to be everyone is going to be soft merged like that. And in a billion years, our biology is going to have, evolved quite a bit. We might be biosynthetic hybrids. We're definitely going to have terraformed Mars, several planets, maybe access to other stars. I think on a 100-year time scale, we're definitely going to have most AI is going to be in the Dyson swarm around the sun, because that's the source of energy. Elon knows that. He's all in on that vision and accelerating that timeline. It relieves a lot of stress for energy and footprint on Earth, so it's a natural way forward. But if we have extremely cheap intelligence, we're gonna be able to one-shot any problem we have in our lives, right? Like, oh, I have a bug, solve. Oh, I have this health problem, solve. What else do you want? That's amazing. That's amazingly good. Like, we're gonna have more of that cheaper, and we just gotta make sure everyone has access to it, and no one convinces you shouldn't have access to it and centralizes it, because that's the dark future. So that's what it's all about. Hopefully the discussion today got people thinking.
I noticed something like a powerful theme between you, which is, like Vitalik, you're arguing for enabling plurality, I would say. And you would say almost the same thing of maximizing variance,
yes,
so to speak. And that seems to be like the central through line of where we're going, and like the top down from where a lot of the other views come from. I love that. So we've been doing this for a while. It's been amazing. I think we're gonna have to wrap it up. I want to leave this just on this has been for us, but I would love if you guys continue to have a conversation after this. You're obviously connected now. What is something that you would each like to kind of leave for each other, and for us obviously, but really for each other, like walking away from this, kind of chewing on, thinking about as we leave this place?
If I unfortunately, if I actually had one, I actually would have loved to just give you one of the cat as a gift. It's the air quality monitor that does cryptography. Because I think it's a super cool device. But how about I will give it to you metaphorically, and it's an IOU, and potentially we will have a much better thing like this, and maybe even something that can, outcompete Fitbit watches and do amazing things for your health, and do it all privately, and you will get it quite soon.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess we'll keep chatting. I think I want to artificial life kill you. Artificial life on the network. I think it could be. It could definitely drive the cost of intelligence down. It could be an economy. We've outsourced manufacturing to China. It allowed us to go to higher levels. Different types of jobs that are more comfortable, higher leverage. Maybe a lot of cognitive work where they could outsource to the swarm of AIs. Eventually, that's gonna live up and dice and swarm and so on. I think there's a unique opportunity right now. Crypto is going to be the coupling between AI and humans. I truly believe that. How else are you going to build trust between species, right? And I think we need to start thinking about that really thoughtfully. So maybe that's we're going to keep chatting about that.
Incredible. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much.